So we're holding in the Nefesh HaHaim Sha'ar Beis Perek Tet. We're working on the theme of Torah and mitzvahs as mazon, as the nourishment of the universe. Particularly, it nourishes the bond, the connection between HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Creator, and His creation. And so we're going to see the language of Reach Nichochi and Lachmi Ishai, the bread, regarding the Korbanos. And I'm actually even going to share something about the current situation, a beautiful poem that we received today about all the chesed that Klal Yisrael is doing one for another. So till now, in the previous chapter, the Nefesh HaHaim mentioned three things. He mentioned Torah study, Esek Torah, Kiyum mitzvahs, and Koyach HaTefillah. All three of those things play a role in this sustenance, this nourishment of this bond, and particularly we've called it Tosefis Veriboy, the increase, the augmentation, the light that and shefa that Hashem is putting into this world, and it comes through these activities. This isorusa dilatata. What's going on down here is a way to sort of control the volume of how much stuff, how much connection, how much spirituality, and even ultimately materiality, even the existence, the ongoing existence of the material world is in response to the spiritual efforts of the Jewish people. And so now this chapter is focusing on the tefillah, not the Torah study and not the kiyum mitzvahs, but dafka, the prayer aspect. So we begin with that. Ubifrat be'es amdoi lispalel lefanav yisbarach. At the time a Jew comes to daven, to stand before God in prayer. Asher b'shad miyuchedet la hi'ikar hamazon le'oilamois u lenefesh ha'adam atzmo. So it's interesting that he says this is the primary sustenance, the mazon for the worlds, but also for the person's own soul. Okay, so your own spiritual existence is nourished by your davening. And I think we could understand that. What if a person never davens or something? Okay, there's people that don't daven. So his soul is going to starve to death. And so he may not die, he may live, but he'll have a starved soul. So he'll become very physical and his spirituality will be so thin, it could almost starve to death. So we're learning that in addition to maintenance and sustenance of the oilamois, there's also an element of mazon lenefesh atzmo through the Ma'aseh Tefillah. Kamo shekasa b'Zohar, mizoyna delay tzelusa de chashiva lekorbana. So of course he always quotes a lot of Zohar. He quotes the Zohar here that it's mazon is prayer. Tzelusa is prayer, which is considered like a korban. So we all know that parallel. Al Torah Avoda v'Gmilus Chasadim, the world is sustained on Torah Avoda Gmilus Chasadim. Torah is pretty clear in a sense, and Gmilus Chasadim, acts of loving kindness. Avoda can be Avodas HaKorbanos when we don't have Avodas HaKorbanos today. So what do we have? We have Avodas HaTefillah. And that's the Avoda, if we think of that as Avram Yitzchak Yaakov. So Torah is Yaakov Avinu. He's Ishtam Yoshev Ohalim. He's in the Beis Midrash. He was in Yeshiva 14 years. Avram Avinu is the man of Gmilus Chasadim. This week's Parsha, he brings the angels into his house. He has guests all the time. He's taking care of people's needs. And the Avoida is Yitzchak Avinu. Yitzchak Avinu himself is an Oila Tmima. He gets put onto the Mizbeach as a korban in the Akedah. And his whole work, after that, he's blind, right? For a great part of his life, he's like a blind man who's focused on his own inner world, a world of prayer and a world of introspection and trying to perfect himself and his midos and so forth. So he's inwardly focused. And so today we don't have korbanos, but we have prayer. Yes.
Were there korbanot in the time of the Avot, or did that come later? And was it was prayer b'makbil to that, or because we always say, oh, prayer is a substitute for the korbanot, but I can't imagine they only did korbanot, because korbanot, it's an extremely physical Maaseh, and I don't know. I think it's more spiritual and intellectually, what's the word I'm looking for? Introspective, to engage in tefillah than to have your goat or your par slaughtered, from the neck.
Yeah,
That doesn't, I don't know how spiritual that
doesn't
would
do
make
anything
me.
for you. I'm with
So
you. So it's a great question, and I will start by saying, we have limited knowledge, I think, of exactly what the Avos did in their service. But well, of course, we have psukim, so we know that Yaakov built here an altar, and Avram built altars here. He made a mizbeach. But we also have Vayikra Sham Avram b'Shem Hashem. So there was a kriya b'Shem Hashem, and that kriya b'Shem Hashem, there's a number of different interpretations. One is to call out in the name of God, like in like community organizer. He's teaching people about God and sharing the gospel with other people. But another is prayer. He's calling out on Hashem, right? Vayikra. We said that in the Yugil Midas. Vayavar al panav vayikra. So we call out God's name. Another one, Arya Kaplan has it. Vayikra b'Shem Hashem is like meditation and saying Shemois of Hashem in a creative and a meditative way. So I agree with you, Shimon, that the Avos were also masters of spirituality. And so part of their avoided, yes, Reb Daniel.
We see from Noach that he took the Behemoth Torah, so it seems over there, and he built a Mizbech afterwards. So it sounds over there that there were actual korbanos.
Absolutely. I mean, for sure, Noach was makriv korbanos. He slaughtered them and burnt them on the mizbech, for sure. And I'm definitely not saying not. And Shimon's also not saying they shouldn't do that or they didn't do that. Just discussing, do we have examples of them also praying?
Also,
and yeah, so I say both. I say they were doing both. It does seem, yeah.
Is it a midrash that says that when the Avot instituted the three tefillot?
Shachris Mincha Ma'ariv.
Yeah, I mean, is it more concrete? I'm not doubting the midrash, the midrashim on that, but if it is midrash, maybe it's not. Maybe it's more concrete than that. So it wasn't just karbanot; it was tefillah, right?
Yeah, fair. So right, there's a Gemara in Brachas Chavav that the Shachris Mincha Ma'ariv, is it ha'avos tiknum or keneged tmidim tiknum? So it's two opinions in the Gemara, and they're for sure both true. And Abraham was mitaken Shachris and Yitzchak Mincha, and we have psukim, right, that supported Vayashkim Avram b'makom asher amad sham, that he would get up in the morning and stand before God like a servant before his master. Vayetze Yitzchak lasuach basadeh, he's going out in midday to again meditate, pray to God. And we have Yaakov Avinu in the evening. He was mitaken Arvis when he came to the Makom HaMikdash and so forth. So the Avos were mitaken Tefillah. So for sure the Avos davened, in addition to building Mizbachot. And I think sometimes they would build Mizbachot without even offering sacrifices on them. There was like, I'm building a monument, I'm building an altar, I'm building a matzeva.
Like a matzeva, yeah.
Yes, they would build matzevos, which was even different than the act of slaughter of an animal. So we have this pillar of avodah, and it's a big part of our lives. I mean, a Jew who davens 3 times a day, that's a pretty big time investment of, whether you go to shul, you daven at home, whatever, but it's an hour or 2 a day that we put into this avodah, which in English, I grew up, we called it services. I'm going to services. And that's really what it is. It's service to God. Like, who's serving whom? What is this? How's the service there? Well, we're serving Shachris, we're serving Mincha, we're serving Arvis. So service, divine service, is a big deal. And so that is where it's the mazon, it's the nourishment, the sustenance of the oilamos and the nefesh ha'adam atzmo.
Rav Yeshua, when you say that the Gemara says that they were metaken the tefillas neged tmidim, does that mean that actual sacrifices that they did, or the tmidim which one day they would do?
this is that the tfilos, that our prayer service was like nitkan, I think, by the Anshe Knesset Agdoila, Keneged Tmidim. So in other words, the Tmidim, the Korban Tamid, which is dictated by the Torah, Tamid Shel Shachar and Tamid Shel Ben Arbayim, and then corresponding to the Tmidim, the Anshe Knesset Agdoila were Metaken, Shachris, and Mincha, and Ma'ariv corresponds to burning leftover stuff that wasn't burnt during the day. So I think according to that Manda Amar, it's historically much later. And it sort of fits with the Rambam. The Rambam holds that mitzvah tefillah d'oraisa is only once a day, and davening 3 times a day is d'Rabbanan. And it would come then from the period of the Anshe Knesset Gdoila, which is like the Babylonian exile in the beginning of Tkuvas Beit Sheni. And so now it's in memory of and corresponding to the Korban Tamid, they enacted a prayer service. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. So the Nefesh HaHaim continues from Parshas Emor, Perikzan, Rivka Amra al Yaakov. Okay, and this David Katzin, who is on active duty right now in Yudah v'Shomron, but he asked about that. We saw last time that what did Yitzchak ask Esav to bring to go hunt for him, a goat or something, and then in the end Rivka prepares those 2 goats for Yaakov to bring to him, and the Zohar understood it that Yitzchak was asking, like as Midas Hadin, he's asking Esav to hunt me some Averas, like we compared it to a prosecutor saying to a policeman, go bring me some criminals. Bring me some criminals, I want to throw the book at them and put them in jail and punish them. So that was like the interplay between Yitzchak Avinu and Esav. And so his question was, so what did Rivka do and what's her role in this? And here I think we're getting closer to that, where he's quoting Rivka Amra Yaakov, Lis'arer ihu be'inun mat'amim delay. Okay, so this is hitorerut of the things that Yitzchak likes. V'Yaakov itar mitata, mislabish betzlusin v'usin. V'yomer mi'efo atzad tzayed, v'kam tzlusin v'usin v'oichel mikol. Parshas Pinchas v'yochel mitzed bego'ilin inun tzlusin de'azin v'izbarchin. Bekitzer, the Zohar is really doing the math here. Yitzchak Avinu asked of Esav, bring me some, I'll call it dinim, some misbehavior, some averas, some stuff like that. And I'm going to punish it. I'm going to rectify it through midat hadin. And instead, Yaakov brings something. So what does Yaakov bring and how does it take the place of what Esav would have brought? And so here I think we're getting a little bit of an inkling that Yaakov's bringing prayer, right? That's what it says here. Yaakov was mis'ar, mislabish, betzlusin uv'usin. Okay, we know when he says becharbi ubekashti. So his cherev, his sword, and his bow is a reference to different types of prayer. So I want to sort of flesh this out. That midat hadin, okay, midat hadin is looking to analyze and scrutinize and see if everything is in order and the way it's supposed to be. And of course, it's not. We live in an imperfect world. So there's issues, there's problems, there's things that need to be fixed. So the Midas Hadin could turn to like the Satan and to be mekatreg and to punish. One way to sort of satisfy, to close the issue of the books where there's been transgressions is to punish them. So midat hadin can be mispayes, it can be appeased through punishment of the wicked for their transgressions. That's what he turned to Esav for. But another way to appease midat hadin is through prayer, like asking for mercy, and even the introspective aspect of prayer of a person who mitpalel, where palel, plili, is something criminal or judgmental, and you're mitpalel, so you are, it's not exactly self-incrimination, it is
Judgment,
self-judgment, where you're evaluating yourself, you're choser b'tshuva, you are mitvadeh, you're making confession for your sins. And that is also satisfactory and brings appeasement of the Midas Hadin, because the system has corrected itself without a punishment necessarily being brought on, because the guilty party has accepted its guilt and made amends through prayer and growth and change and so forth. So, tshuva tzvila utstaka mavirin es roya hagzeira. So this is the power of prayer to also be an answer for the rectification of misdeeds. So that's how I think the Nefesh HaChaim is bringing the Zohar here, that Rivka sends Yaakov in not with the koyach that Esav was going to go of bringing bad stuff, but with the koyach of tzlusin u'ba'usin, with the power of prayer, which is another means to appease the midat hadin. Ubezohar sham bir kol seder akasu v'chalti ya'ari gamal seder matbeat tefila kula mireshisa soifa in sham. Al seder atfila ba'oifen acher ktsas fein v'sham al razada aser lebarnash litom klum ad yechol malka ilah. You can't eat anything until you daven in the morning, because you can't have your breakfast until kavayachol he has his. Uma ihu, and what is God's breakfast, as it were, the king's breakfast? It is tzlusa, the prayer service. Ad malka ilah achel v'hainu Gimel Rishonis v'Gimel Achronos. Those are the prayers that we say in the morning. Kavayachol, that is the king's breakfast. It's all based on this understanding. Shehu hamshachas toisefes kedusha ubracha b'nihiru, which is light. Lekol almin k'meforish b'zor v'yichi anal ein sham hetev v'tzarech ha'oived amiti lechaven lezeh. So the Nefesh HaChaim concludes this passage by saying, if you are on a high level in your divine service, this is something you should think about. That when you are praying, you are creating this connection between God and the world, between God and yourself, and you are nourishing it. You are providing sustenance. Sarech ha'oived amiti lechaven lezeh. Okay? So let's see this Haggah. Haggah v'avodas hatfila neged tamidim tiknua. We just talked about that the prayer service was enacted corresponding to the Korban Tamid. Shayu gamkein b'shat kavua lahem. Ikar hamazon hanal. So the Tamid shel Shachar and the Tamid shel Ben Arboim were also like set meal times in the morning and in the afternoon. Ki inyan es korbani lachmi. Es hakeves echad taseh v'boiker v'es hakeves hasheni taseh ben arbaim. Ki inyan su'udat haboker va'erev shein ikar hamazon. People used to eat especially 2 meals a day. And so the keves in the morning and one in the afternoon, and this is the ikar mazon of, again, the oilamos. V'ksiv ki es lechem elokecha hu makriv. A number of examples in the Mikra where the korbanos and the avodas korbanos is called lechem elokecha. And again, we've talked about this before, and for us, none of us think that God eats, right? It's very pashut to us that God does not eat the korbanos, and there's many psukim that also point that out. And so what is this talking about when we say it's like, sudas haboiker and sudas ha'erev and lechem elokecha? So it's talking again about this connection between the spiritual world and the material world, and maintaining the connection between God and his creation. So this makes the Jewish people in the Beis HaMikdash that we are parnasato kaviyachol, we're being mefarnes, we are providing for this sustenance. V'ayin zohar v'yetze es korbani lachmi parshas vaychi binyamin zev yitraf yavodoidi legana v'yoichal b'chol elu ma'amarim ba'orech. So again, there's a lot of ma'amarim in this direction. Dirshu kol inyan hakasu achalti ya'ari al sod inyan hakorbanos v'ayin sham inyan nifla b'zeh. Okay. V'kein parat וביאר שם כל איברי כלי מבשלי ומאכלי האכילה שבאדם. So we talked about this last time, how the digestive process in a person corresponds also to a very holy thing of processing. And he's saying that here, that the organs, the digestive organs in a person, Heimagamken besidre pirke hamerkava olamot bekochot elyonim mechuvanim b'shemot otam ha'evarim mamesh shehin klei mevashle umevarere hakorban. So this is fascinating, where every year, we go through the Mishkan and Vayikra, all the Korbanis, and our understanding of it is sort of, it's not that it's superficial, it's just that it's on the outside. We learn the dinim of a shlamim and an oila and an asham and a chatas, etc. But what's really going on and how does this really work? So, there are books that talk about that. And the Nefesh HaChaim is sharing a little bit about that here, that he's saying that what happens on the Mizbeach, that, we separate the animal, we take the chaylev and we sprinkle the blood. If it's an oila, we burn the whole thing. But it's comparable to digestion in the human body, where our body breaks down what we eat and it extracts vitamins and minerals and carbohydrates, fats and proteins, and so forth. There's a whole processing going on, and there's parallels between the earthly process of digestion in a person and the heavenly processes of the extraction of koichos, of spiritual energy, from these animals that were shechted by the Kohanim with kavana. And again, the thoughts are important, that were done in the korbanos. I'll read a little more here in the Hebrew, and then I have some good stuff here in the English notes. Ein sham heitev bezoar besod gim adalid dargin de korban ishe reach nichoyach lashem, four levels. Gimel dargin atarech nichoyach kesidra, and begimel ikare evre achila. Oh, here it is. Kaved lev moach. Okay, the liver, the heart, and the brain. Okay, so now we're going to go into a little bit of detail about this. The isha, the fire offering, is bekaved. The reach is belev, and the nichoach refers to the brain. I'm not going to go too far into it. He says, Shal yadam ityashrim hagimel bechinos naran, the nefesh ruach neshama, she'ikar mishkanam hu betoch elu gimel evarim. And that we've talked about before. There's a correspondence between the kaved to the nefesh, the leiv to the ruach, and the moach to the neshama. So now we are actually getting a little bit of insight to how this works in the korbanos, that there's stuff happening on these three levels of nefesh, ruach, neshama, of kaved, lev, moach. She'al yadam isyashim gimel, and we'll gimel evarim ba'od darga ilah tmira b'chinas nishmasa delishmasa sod sheresh haneshama advuk havayachal bo yizbarach v'zeu lashem. Okay. And the last sentence here, V'lechein amru razal bizman shebeis hamikdash haya kayam mizbeach mechaper. When we had the holy temple, so there were korbanos, and that brought kapara for Klal Yisrael. Achshav, we don't have the Beis Hamikdash. We don't have this means of attaining atonement. So from where do we get kapara? Achshav, shulchano shel adam mechaper olav. So I want to share with you now sort of three pshatim in this Maimer Chazal. There's Rashi, there's the Marsha, and now tonight we've learned a third pshat here in the Nefesh HaChaim. Rashi's pshat is Shulchano shel Adam mechaper alav. I think it's Rashi who says by feeding other people there, Gemilus Chasadim. Okay, so we don't have the Beis Hamikdash, but we still have tzedakah and chesed. So your table atones for you, because you feed other people at your table, including your children, right? Remember, your children, you don't really have to support them after the age of maybe 6 or something. So if you have kids at your table, it's really an act of tzedakah that you're supporting them, and that's constant. I think that's a really big deal, that a Jewish family that's supporting and loving of one another. So the shulchan is a makom kapara on a daily basis. Kol shekain if you invite guests over and you're doing that. The Maharsha learns from the aspect of Torah that at every meal you should say Divrei Torah. And even if it's just Mizmor LeDavid, that's good, or Shir Amalois, whatever you do, say a Mishnah, say a Halacha, Mayim Achronim Chayva, whatever you say. But at every meal there should be some Divrei Torah, and that Torah is Mechaper Alav. Shulchano Shel Adam Mechaper Alav, because at your table you should always say Divrei Torah. So those are two pshatim in this Maimer Chazal from the Gemara Brachas that Bizman Shebeis HaMikdash Kayim Mizbeach Mechaper Alav, Achshav Shulchano Shel Adam Mechaper Alav. But the Nefesh HaHaim is bringing a third pshat. It's not the tzedakah and it's not the Torah. It's the eating and the digestion itself. Okay? There's this correspondence between the digestive process, the extraction of the goodness from the bad, and it goes in your leiv, your kaved leiv moach, for your nefesh, ruach, and neshama, and that is sustaining the world. You're feeding the spirituality of the world. We used to do it in the Beis HaMikdash. Now we do it at our own table. We eat kosher, and we make brachas, and we have good intent. We're eating to have koyak to serve God, and that shulchano shel adam mechaper alav through the very act of eating and digesting the food. So it's a davar nifla, really, that we're doing something very important every time we sit down at the table.
I think,
yes.
I'm sorry. Interesting the way that's worded, because, excuse me, when it says, Bizman Shebeit HaMikdash Haya Kayam Mizbeach Mechaper, and Achshav Shulchano Mechaper, right? But is it the Mishnah Berurah or the Shulchan? I'm not sure which says that you really should sit for Kiddush, chutz mi vayachulu, because that's like Edut. You should sit for the rest of it, and Shabbat, Yom, Shabbat, Kiddush Rabbah, what do they call it? The Kiddush Rabbah, because the Shulchan is not a Mizbeach. I've heard that line.
Mizbeach?
That's right. Your Shulchan is not a Mizbeach, so you should sit. And here it's kind of indicating the opposite.
That it's like a mizbeach. The shulchan is doimel mizbeach.
But you would think if it's doimel mizbeach, then you should stand, right?
I'm not familiar with standing or sitting because of that. But the idea of taking the knives off the table, that has to do with the shulchan being doimel mizbeach, and you weren't allowed to have barzel on it. I think the shulchan is doimel mizbeach. So,
okay.
Yeah. Okay. So I have here from this quote from the Zohar Pinchas, and I'm reading from the English. The brain, which is male, i.e. relates to the partsuv of Zer Anpin, rides on and controls the heart, which is female and relates to Malchus and the partsuf of Nukva. The heart controls and rides on the liver. The liver is both Samoel, the angel of death, and the snake, the Nachash, which brought death to mankind. So it's a unified entity comprising the diaphragm and the liver. Therefore, with a sacrifice, the diaphragm is the snake and the liver is the food of the male, which is the secret of the Sitra Achra. The heart does not take from any of the sacrifices, except from the confession, the vidui which was performed with it, which ascends with the smoke and the prayer performed over the sacrifice. That addresses what you said, Shimon, like the sacrifice is so physical. Is that really what's bringing about the tikkun? So here it says it's not, some of the tikkun is coming from the words associated with it, the vidui that you did before you shechted it, and that goes up with the smoke when you burn it. Then the heart of the sacrifice is to the brain, the will of the unity of the Kohanim within it, and the joy of the Leviim. So that's really, a fascinating thing about kaved lev moach, the liver, the heart, and the brain, and the nefesh, ruach, neshama. And here he's talking about the partsufim and so forth. So there's all this depth going on, both with the korbanos and the Beis HaMikdash, but now even with the food that we eat at the table. I was going to add, Shimon, when you talked about the table, the Shla Kodesh brings a custom of European Jews that as they got older and they were really ready to pass on, they would use their dining room table to make an aron, to make their coffin for burial.
Really
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah. Because of this idea that when they're ready to be buried in the earth, they want to take with them their shulchan, that it's mechaper aleim. They did all these mitzvahs at their table. And so now the table, they're going with that to be buried. When a person is buried, like they used to put in some afar from Eretz Yisrael, that it's as if he's buried mitachas lemizbeach, that he's buried, mimakom kaparaso, from the place that we were created in the beginning. God created man from the makom mizbeach. So you want to be buried with your mizbeach, with your shulchan. So that's I don't know anybody who does that custom today. You'll have to talk to the Chevra Kaddish in advance to make that happen. It's a logistical issue.
Even tougher when you have a glass table.
Yeah, right. But it's something to think about. Okay, I'm gonna let you go a little early tonight. I know you're at the hospital and you have stuff going on. And we
I
wish
can't
you.
even. I was reduced to like planning day by day because there was so, you'd plan